I never thought a simple sentence could change the temperature of a whole room. But the night I looked at my husband, Daniel, across our small oak kitchen table and said, "I'm unemployed," the air around us seemed to fold in on itself. Quiet, tight, like it was waiting to see what he would do. He didn't even look up right away, just kept stirring his coffee, slow circles, the spoon clicking gently against the ceramic. Finally he said, "Oh, really?" No surprise, no worry, no rush to hold my hand, just, "Oh." And something inside me flinched. I had told him the lie, not because I wanted to trick him, but because I wanted to see where his heart was. I had been feeling it for months, a distance spreading between us like a thin crack under old paint. You can ignore it for a while, but eventually it reaches somewhere it shouldn't. The truth was, I still had my job at the small community center downtown. I still supervised the after-school programs, still knew every kid who tried to sneak extra snacks, still wiped glue from tiny fingers. But I'd been watching Daniel drift inward, giving his energy to places I couldn't see. So that night, I tested him, and his reaction slipped into me like a cold needle. Later, I walked into our bedroom and saw the shape of his shoulders under the lamplight. He was turned away from me, scrolling his phone, the screen lighting his face in flickers. When I asked him what he thought about what I'd said about losing my job, he just murmured, "We'll figure it out," like someone commenting on the weather. No arms around me, no questions. No, "Are you okay?" Just a distant reassurance that didn't touch the edges of my fear. I lay beside him that night with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling fan circling slow above us, trying to listen to the rhythm of our breathing. His felt steady. Mine felt like it kept catching on something I couldn't name. The next morning, I tried to ease myself back into normal life. I dropped a few eggs into a pan, the sizzle rising sharp and comforting. The kitchen smelled like butter and a little bit of burnt toast. Daniel always forgot to pop it up in time. He came in wearing his work shirt half-buttoned. That navy one, he said, made him look like a manager, even though he wasn't one yet. I waited for him to ask more questions about my so-called unemployment. He didn't. Instead, he kissed the top of my head like always, grabbed the toast and rushed out the door, muttering something about traffic. It stung more than I expected. I kept telling myself, maybe he's stressed. Maybe he didn't know what to say. Maybe it'll hit him later. But something deeper whispered, or maybe he already knew. Maybe he didn't need to react. That thought stayed with me during my drive to the community center. I cracked the window, letting the early morning air brush against my face. It smelled faintly of fresh tar from the construction on Maple Street and the wet leaves scattered by last night's storm. The world felt normal, the kind of normal that holds your hand when your life doesn't. When I walked into the center, the kids' voices filled the halls. Energetic, chaotic, grounding. I watched little Marcy hop in place because she wanted to show me the glitter bracelet she made. I listened to two boys argue about who could run faster. Their lives were simple, sweet, untouched by the heavy things adults carry in secret. Meanwhile, mine felt like it had a shadow following behind every thought. I tried to focus on my work, but Daniel's face kept floating back to me. Calm, too calm. A man who had just heard his wife lost her income should have shown something: worry, protectiveness, even irritation. But Daniel had been neutral, like he'd read the script ahead of time. Around noon, while I sat in my small office with my lunch, a salad I barely touched, my phone buzzed. Daniel's name lit up the screen. My chest tightened. His message was just one line: "Don't stress about things. I'll handle it." Handle what? Handle me? I stared at the message until the words felt like they were pulsing. Something was wrong. I knew it in my bones. That evening, when I got home, the house felt unusually still. Daniel wasn't back yet. I walked into the kitchen, set my purse down, and fidgeted with the loose strap. I almost wanted to tell him the truth, that I hadn't lost my job, that I just needed reassurance, that I needed to feel he still cared. But the universe has a strange way of showing you the truth before you're ready to see it. Because that night, as I walked down the hallway toward our bedroom, I heard his voice. He was in the den, talking on the phone in that low, careful tone he used when he didn't want to be overheard. Something about it made me pause. I know I should have kept walking. I know eavesdropping is the gateway to heartbreak. But my feet stayed rooted to the carpet, my hand hovering near the wall, breath held tight inside my chest. At first I heard nothing clear, just Daniel's murmured voice, rising and falling. Then a few words pushed through the silence like knives through fabric. She thinks she lost her job. A pause. No, she told me yesterday. Another pause. Longer, heavier. Yes. It works out better this way. Better this way? My blood turned cold. My hand trembled. I leaned closer, the carpet fibers brushing my toes, and my heart drumming so loudly I worried he would hear it. Daniel's voice came through again, quiet but sharp enough to slice something inside me. She won't question anything. Not now. I froze. It felt like the world had stopped moving, like even the dust in the hallway had paused midair just to witness the moment my life began to split open. What wouldn't I question? What had he been hiding? Why did my unemployment, my lie, somehow benefit him? I stepped back, my breath coming shallow, my hands cold. My mind raced through memories. Little things I'd dismissed, moments that suddenly glowed with warning signs I hadn't seen. And in that instant, standing in the dim hallway of my own home, listening to the man I loved speak about me like I was a problem he had already solved, I understood one thing with painful clarity. The lie I told him wasn't the real test. The real test was just beginning. I don't remember walking back to our bedroom. I don't remember how I ended up sitting on the edge of the bed, hands clasped so tightly my knuckles turned white. All I knew was the sound of my own pulse, quick and uneven, as if my body was trying to warn me of something bigger than I could yet understand. When Daniel finally hung up and walked into the room, he didn't notice anything unusual. He just grabbed a spare charger from the dresser, kissed the side of my head, and said, "You doing okay?" His voice was warm, soft, too soft. The kind of softness people use to keep you calm when they're hiding the truth. I just nodded. It was all I could manage without my voice breaking. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, his words echoed back. She won't question anything. Not now. Not now. As if he'd been waiting for the chance. Around 3 a.m, after watching the red digits on the clock blink into the next hour, I slipped out of bed and walked into the kitchen, letting the cool tile floor ground me. I poured myself a glass of water, but my hands were shaking so badly half of it spilled onto the counter. Something was happening behind my back. Something Daniel thought I was too distracted or too helpless to notice. The next day, I left for work earlier than usual. The sky was still tinted blue-gray, and the neighborhood looked quiet, like a stage before the actors walk out. I sat in my car for a long time before turning the key, my fingers tapping the steering wheel in a rhythm that didn't match my heartbeat. I needed answers, but I needed to be smart. At the community center, I tried to bury myself in work, but my mind kept spinning. Every kid who tugged on my sleeve felt like a tiny anchor, keeping me tethered to normal life. But every time my phone buzzed, with a message from Daniel checking what time I'd be home, the air around me tightened again. It took me until lunch to make a decision. I called my friend Julia. Julia had known me since college. She was the kind of friend who never sugarcoated anything. Kind but sharp where you needed her to be. When she picked up, the sound of clattering dishes came through the phone. She was probably at her cafe. "Hey girl," she said, "everything okay?" I hesitated. That hesitation must have said more than I intended because her voice changed. "Sophie, what happened?" I told her. Not everything, not the part where I'd collapsed to the hallway floor listening to my husband speak about me like a pawn, but enough. Enough for her to quietly exhale and say, You need to find out what he's planning." "I know," I whispered. She didn't tell me to confront him. She knew me better than that. Knew I needed the full picture before I walked into any storm. "Snoop," she said plainly. I almost laughed. "Julia, no, I'm serious. I'm not saying break anything or hack anything. Just look, observe, pure gathering of data." Her voice steadied me in a way I didn't know I needed. So that evening, I did something I never thought I would do in my own marriage. I searched. Not in the messy, panicked way people imagine, rifling through drawers or tossing things around. No. I moved through the house quietly, with intent, looking for anything that didn't belong in the life we'd built. But Daniel was careful, very careful. His drawers were neat, his folders clean, his laptop password protected, his phone glued to him like an extra limb. Yet I found something small, almost insignificant, inside the pocket of his gray jacket hanging by the door. A receipt from a private meeting room rental at a place called Brookside Co-work Suites, a small, upscale business space on the other side of town. The date on the receipt was last week. I stared at it. For a long time, the thin paper trembling between my fingertips. Daniel didn't work in a job that needed meeting rooms. He wasn't building a business. He didn't have side projects. And he definitely didn't tell me he'd gone to anything like that. I felt a strange calm wash over me, the kind that settles into your bones when fear becomes certainty. I folded the receipt and tucked it back exactly where I found it. Then I went to the kitchen, sat at the table, and waited for him to come home. He walked in around 6. I listened to the sound of his keys hitting the bowl, the sigh he always made when he loosened his tie. He kissed my cheek. I watched his eyes. He looked normal, unbothered, as if nothing in the world was pressing in on him. But now that I was studying him, I noticed details I had missed before, or maybe refused to see. The way he checked his phone a bit too often, the slight pause before he answered my questions, the distracted look when I spoke. Then, out of nowhere, he offered something that made my stomach clench. "So," he said, pouring himself a glass of water, "have you had time to think about, next steps? For work?" There it was, the fishing line. "I don't know," I murmured. "It's a lot to process." He nodded sympathetically. Of course. Just don't stress. I've been thinking, and maybe, just maybe, this is the perfect time for a fresh start, for both of us." "Both of us?" He said it with such hope in his voice, such rehearsed optimism, that it chilled me more than any argument ever could have. I watched him walk across the kitchen, his back to me, his shoulders relaxed, and all I could think was, this man is planning something, and whatever it is, he thinks he needs my vulnerability to make it happen. That night, after he fell asleep, I lay awake again, staring into the dark. But this time, the fear was different. It wasn't aimless. It was focused. And by morning, I knew what I had to do. I had to go to Brookside Co-work Suites. I had to hear what he was saying in those rooms. I had to find out who he was meeting. Whatever was happening, whatever he thought I wouldn't question, I was going to uncover it myself, even if the truth broke me. I didn't tell Daniel where I was going the next day. I didn't even change my routine. I woke up, made breakfast, packed my lunch, and kissed his cheek like always. The only difference was the quiet resolve sitting inside my chest, steadying me the way his love was supposed to. He left before me, humming to himself as he walked out the door. I stood there for a moment after he was gone, hand resting on the knob, breathing in the lingering scent of his aftershave. It used to comfort me. Now it just made my stomach twist. At the community center, I moved through the halls like a ghost, smiling at the kids, answering questions, giving instructions, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. I kept glancing at the clock on the wall. The second hand ticking its steady rhythm felt like a countdown. Finally, at 11, I grabbed my purse, told my assistant director I needed to step out for an hour, and headed to the car. Brookside Co-work Suites was a 20-minute drive, tucked into a quiet business park lined with manicured hedges and empty sidewalks. The kind of place people go when they want privacy, or when they want to hide. The building was modern, all glass and steel, reflecting the soft blue of the late morning sky. The lobby smelled faintly of lemon polish, and the receptionist looked up at me with a professional smile. "Good morning. Do you have a reservation?" "No," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm actually looking for someone. My husband, Daniel Carter. He's had meetings here recently." Her fingers paused over her keyboard. Something flickered across her face. Recognition? Discomfort? I couldn't tell. She lowered her voice. "I'm not supposed to share client information, ma'am." The disappointment hit me like a small punch. I nodded, started to turn away. Then she whispered, barely audible, "Second floor, room 214. I looked back at her. She didn't meet my eyes, just pretended to straighten a stack of papers. I whispered, "Thank you," and walked toward the elevator, my knees trembling. The second-floor hallway was quiet, carpeted, and cold, the kind of cold that made you feel like sound didn't travel far. I found room 214 at the end of the hall. The door was slightly cracked, and then I heard his voice, "Daniel." I stood frozen for a moment, hand hovering near the doorframe, breath stuck in my throat. Then another voice joined his, light, female, familiar in a way that made something deep inside me twist. I leaned closer. "I told you," Daniel was saying. "She thinks she lost her job. This is the perfect time. She won't fight me on anything right now." A woman laughed softly, a small practice sound. "You're lucky. Not everyone gets such an easy opening." Opening. The word made my skin crawl. "Once the account transfers," Daniel continued, "we'll have everything set, and then we can move forward." Account transfers. My pulse thudded in my ears. Account? What account? Mine? Ours? Something I didn't know about? And move forward? With who? I pressed my fingers against my lips to keep from gasping. The woman spoke again, her tone smooth. "You know I trust you, Daniel. But are you sure she won't suspect anything?" Daniel sighed. "Sophie? No. She never questions me. She's too soft-hearted, too trusting." My chest tightened so sharply it felt like someone had grabbed my ribs and squeezed. I had always been proud of my kindness, my gentleness. Hearing it twisted into a weakness made me feel like I didn't recognize myself. "But," he continued, "she's been different lately." The woman hummed. "Worried? Maybe? I don't know. But even if she senses something, she won't have proof." My vision blurred for a second. Proof. Proof of what? I leaned even closer, my heart in my throat. Then the woman's voice dropped to a near whisper, intimate in a way that made heat rush to my ears. "And after everything settles, we can take that trip, just the two of us." A wave of cold swept through my entire body. My hands started shaking uncontrollably. Daniel murmured something I couldn't hear, but the tone was enough. A tone I hadn't heard from him in months. Warm, engaged, attentive. The tone a man uses when he's talking to someone who makes his world feel brighter. A tone he no longer had for me. I stumbled back from the door and nearly hit the opposite wall. The hallway felt too narrow, the air too thin. I pressed my hand to my chest, trying to contain the pain spreading like wildfire beneath my ribs. I had imagined a lot of possibilities, financial secrets, some business scheme, maybe even manipulation. But not this, not a woman, not another life. I don't know how long I stood there, barely breathing, before footsteps approached inside the room. I panicked and hurried down the hallway, slipping around the corner just as the door opened. I heard them, Daniel and the woman, laughing softly as they walked out of the room together. My back was pressed against the cool drywall, my breath shallow. I peeked around the corner. The woman was younger than me. Blonde hair, sleek and neat, professional pencil skirt, confident walk. She said something to Daniel that made him smile, really smile. in a way he hadn't smiled in front of me in a long time. They walked down the hallway, not touching, but with a closeness that felt practiced. When the elevator doors closed behind them, I sank onto a small bench against the wall, my legs too weak to hold me. My whole body trembled, not from anger yet, but from disbelief. From betrayal so sharp it felt like a physical wound. And I realized something then, sitting alone in that silent hallway. Daniel wasn't just planning something behind my back. He was building a life without me. And worse, he was using my supposed unemployment to do it. For the first time. Since all this began, the tears came. Hot, heavy, unstoppable. They fell silently, one after another, dripping onto my hands. It took me several minutes before I could breathe without my chest hitching. Then a steadiness settled inside me. Not numbness, not fear, determination. If Daniel thought I was too soft-hearted to question him, if he thought I wouldn't find proof, if he thought I would sit quietly while he moved my life like pieces on a board, he didn't know me anymore. I stood up, wiped my face, and walked out of the building with a single thought burning through me. He wanted an easy opening, but he had no idea what door he had just opened. The drive home felt unreal, like I was moving through a world made of glass. Everything looked normal. Cars, passing, trees swaying, the radio humming softly. But none of it touched me. My mind kept replaying the scene in that hallway. Daniel's voice, her laugh, the plans they whispered like I no longer existed. When I pulled into our driveway, the house stood there exactly as it always had. White siding, trimmed hedges, the wind chime Daniel bought last spring. And yet, it didn't feel like my home anymore. It felt like a stage set, like props arranged for a life I was no longer part of. Inside, the air smelled faintly of vanilla, my candle from the night before. I set my purse down and stood there in the living room, hands hanging at my sides. I wasn't sure what to do first. Cry? Scream? Collapse? Instead, I walked to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and looked at myself in the mirror. My reflection looked older than I remembered. Not tired, hurt. Deeply hurt. The kind of hurt you don't hide with concealer or a forced smile. The kind that changes something fundamental in you. I whispered to myself, "You're okay. You're okay." But the truth was, I wasn't. Daniel texted me around 2, heading home early. Want takeout? Takeout, like everything was normal. Like he hadn't spent the morning planning a future with another woman. My hands trembled as I typed back, "Sure, whatever you want." Because I needed him calm. I needed him unaware. I needed time. He arrived home at 4, carrying a bag of Thai food. He was cheerful, almost warm, humming some tune from the radio. The moment he saw me in the kitchen, he leaned in to kiss me. And for the first time in our marriage, I stepped back. Not dramatically, just a slight shift. But he noticed. "You okay?" he asked, pausing with a confused smile. I forced something between a smile and a shrug. Just tired. He accepted that, too easily. And something about that ease made me realize just how far apart we'd drifted. A man in love would have looked closer, tried harder, reached for me. Daniel didn't. While we ate dinner, he talked about mundane things. Traffic, a coworker's promotion, gas prices. I nodded, silent, pushing noodles around my plate. The memory of him laughing with that woman, her hand brushing his sleeve, kept slicing through my thoughts. He never once asked how I was doing with my unemployment. Not once. After dinner, he went to shower. I stayed in the kitchen, alone with the soft hum of the refrigerator and the growing weight in my chest. I needed answers about the account, and I needed them fast. When I heard the water start running, I walked quietly into our bedroom and reached for his briefcase. My heart pressed hard against my ribs as I opened it. Inside were the usual things: pens, notes, a few receipts, and a small folder. Thin, plain, no label. My fingers hesitated before lifting it out. I opened it, and there it was, a printed document with my name at the top. Joint account adjustment request. My stomach dropped. The form had already been filled in, with Daniel's handwriting. He was preparing to move nearly half of our savings into a separate account in his name, an account I had never heard of, an account in which I would have no access, no rights, nothing. There were sticky notes attached with dates, his reminders, and the last one read, "Submit after Sophie confirms job loss." I felt physically ill. My hands curled around the edges of the paper as nausea rolled through me. He wasn't just cheating. He wasn't just planning a life with someone else. He was preparing to leave me with nothing. Every mortgage payment, every grocery bill, every dinner I cooked, every exhausting shift I worked to help build our life. He was quietly pulling it all out from under me. The shower turned off. I quickly placed everything back exactly as I found it and returned to the kitchen. I sat at the table, staring at the dark window, trying to steady my breathing. When Daniel came out of the bathroom, hair damp, wearing his worn college t-shirt, he smiled at me like nothing had changed. "Movie tonight?" he asked, casual, comfortable. For a second, a single fragile second, I almost broke. It was the familiarity in his voice, the easy way he moved around me. The ghost of the man I'd married flickered inside him. But then I remembered the document, the laughing woman, the account transfer, the trip, just the two of them, and the softness inside me hardened. "Sure," I said quietly. "A movie sounds nice." Because I needed to plan, because I needed space, because I needed proof, and because if Daniel thought I was blind, I could use that blindness like a weapon. We sat on the couch and watched something forgettable. He placed his hand on my thigh, and it took everything in me not to pull away. He kept leaning his shoulder into mine, comfortable as ever, while I sat frozen, trying not to reveal the storm building inside. Around 10, he started dozing off. He always fell asleep during movies. He tilted his head against the back cushion and exhaled softly. I watched him sleep, my husband, my betrayer, the man I had once trusted more than anyone in this world. I felt a strange sense of mourning, as if someone had died. In a way, someone had. The Daniel I knew, the marriage I loved, the life I believed in. They were gone. When he finally woke enough to drag himself to bed, he kissed my temple and whispered, "Good night, Soph." I whispered back, "Good night." But inside me, another sentence echoed, "Tomorrow I start protecting myself. Because love may make you soft, but betrayal sharpens you in ways you never asked for." And by morning, I knew exactly what I was going to do. The next morning, I woke with a clarity that scared me. It wasn't the kind of clarity that comes from calm reflection. It was sharp, precise, like the edge of a knife. I had to act. I had to know the full extent of Daniel's plan before I confronted him. I couldn't rely on suspicion alone. I needed facts. I made my coffee and sat at the kitchen table, letting the warm mug anchor me. The house smelled faintly of toasted bread and cinnamon from the candle I'd left burning the night before. Daniel was already gone, humming something tuneless as he left for work. That hum, once comforting, now sounded like a warning. I grabbed my purse and headed back to Brookside Co-work Suites. This time, I wasn't going to just overhear. I needed something concrete. I parked at the far end of the lot and walked up to the building, pretending to be a visitor looking for a meeting room. The receptionist raised an eyebrow but didn't question me. My heart was pounding with every step I took toward room 214. I waited outside the door, pressing my ear lightly against the wood. Voices, Daniel's and hers, were already there. I held my breath and pulled my phone out, recording the conversation with the small, trembling confidence of someone who had no choice but to arm themselves with evidence. "She thinks she lost her job," Daniel said, his voice smooth, practiced. "Perfect timing. Everything goes through my name, and she won't notice a thing until it's too late." Her laugh, soft and deliberate, sent a shiver down my spine. "I told you you're good at this. I'd be worried if it were anyone else." "I've done it before," he said, almost proudly. She trusts me too much. There it was, the admission I had feared but hadn't been sure I'd hear. Trust used as a weapon. The woman's name floated through the conversation, Claire. I made a mental note, every syllable etched into memory. The next hour passed in agonizing patience. They discussed accounts, investments, even future trips. Trips he planned to take with her. My life, our life, was being divided and repurposed behind my back. I swallowed hard, trying not to lose control, but rage and grief surged together so violently it made my stomach twist. When they finally left the room, laughing softly together, I slipped into the hallway and retraced their path without being seen. My mind was already working faster than my body could move. I needed proof of the account transfers, of the money, of everything he was doing. Back at home, I acted as though nothing had happened. I asked Daniel casually about his workday, letting him spill his usual lines of boredom and office gossip. I nodded and smiled, all while calculating my next move. I contacted the bank that held our joint account, explaining that I needed information regarding recent changes. The banker, oblivious to the storm I was brewing, asked for verification. I provided enough proof of my identity to access statements and transaction history. And there it was. The transfers had started. Large sums moved into accounts I had never been told about. Statements signed by Daniel alone. It was all there, clear as day. Betrayal was no longer a shadow. It was a document I could hold in my hands. I felt a strange calm settle over me. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but clarity had given me a focus. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to confront blindly. I was going to act with intelligence, dignity, and precision. I spent the evening drafting letters, calling the bank to freeze accounts, and quietly documenting every move Daniel had made, every transfer, every meeting, every whispered conversation he thought I hadn't heard. By the time he came home, carrying Chinese food like nothing had changed, I had a folder ready, a small, neat pile of evidence that would make the truth undeniable. He smiled at me, kissed my temple, and asked, "Rough day?" I returned the smile, cold but composed. "Not too bad. How was your meeting?" He hesitated for a fraction of a second. That split second felt like a lifetime. He glanced at me, and I thought I saw a flicker of something, maybe concern, maybe guilt. But it passed almost immediately. "I got some things sorted," he said. He sounded confident, comfortable, too comfortable. "Good," I murmured, sipping my tea. "I've been thinking we should probably review our finances together. Make sure we're on the same page." His smile faltered, just for a moment. "Of course," he said, a little tighter than usual. I waited until he went to the bedroom to change. Then I quietly called my sister Maggie, explaining everything in whispers, the anger and betrayal spilling out through trembling words. She promised to come over in the evening. When she arrived, I had everything laid out on the kitchen table: bank statements, receipts, recordings from Brookside. I watched her eyes widen as she processed the scope of Daniel's betrayal. "He's been planning this for months," I said, voice steady despite the shaking inside. "He used my unemployment as a cover to take control of our money, and he's planning a life with her. Claire." Maggie placed a hand over mine. "Sophie, this is serious. You need legal advice fast." I nodded. "I know, but I want him to see the consequences. I want him to face what he's done, not just run away with it." Together, we drafted an email to his lawyer and set up meetings with our bank to ensure no further transfers could occur without my knowledge. Every step was measured, every action deliberate. I was reclaiming control of my life, my home, my dignity. When Daniel came down for dinner later, he was unaware of the storm that had quietly gathered in our home. He talked about mundane things again, trying to anchor normalcy. I nodded, smiled, and asked questions that seemed innocent but were calculated to gauge how much he believed I knew. He looked tired after a while, and I realized that guilt, even if he didn't fully feel it, was a weight pressing against him. I kept my expression calm, my hands steady. I let him relax in the illusion of safety, because tomorrow the truth would hit him where it hurt most, in the certainty that he could manipulate me. And for the first time in weeks, I felt the quiet thrill of empowerment. I wasn't powerless anymore. The next morning, I woke with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. Breakfast was quiet, the smell of toast and coffee filling the kitchen as Daniel scrolled through his phone, oblivious to the changes unfolding beneath his calm exterior. I watched him, and for the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt calculation. By mid-morning, I had arranged a meeting with our bank and an attorney. I told Daniel I was going out for errands, though in truth I was preparing the final pieces of the confrontation. I printed copies of the account transfers, the statements, the emails, and the recordings from Brookside. Everything, every lie, every betrayal, every plan he thought I'd never discover. When I returned home, Daniel was in the living room, lounging casually, a book in his hands. He looked up and smiled, the easy charm that had once lulled me into comfort. "Hey," he said, standing as I entered. "How was your errands?" I set the folder down carefully on the coffee table. The paper rustled softly. I looked at him, my expression unreadable, calm but steady. "Daniel," I said, my voice quiet but firm, "we need to talk." His smile faltered slightly. "Sure, about what?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I opened the folder and slid it across the table toward him. "This." He looked down at the papers. The color drained from his face almost instantly. His eyes flicked from the account transfers to the recordings I had made at Brookside, then to the bank statements. I can explain," he started, but I cut him off. "No," I said, shaking my head. "There's nothing to explain. I overheard your meetings, Daniel. I've seen the accounts you've moved. I know about Claire. I know about the trips, the plans, the lies you've built around my trust." He sank into the couch, running a hand through his hair. For the first time, he looked small, vulnerable. Not the confident, smiling man I'd married, not the man who thought he could manipulate me. I didn't think you'd find out yet," he said softly. "You didn't think I was paying attention," I replied. "You didn't think I noticed the little things, the patterns, the timing. You thought I was too soft-hearted. You thought my trust could be used as a weapon against me." He said nothing, just stared down at the folder, and I realized how heavy it must feel. The proof of everything laid bare, the life he had tried to construct without me exposed in black and white. I took a deep breath. I contacted the bank. "The transfers are frozen. I've spoken to an attorney. There's no way for you to move anything else without my knowledge. And I've kept every recording, every document. The moment you thought I was unemployed, you planned to erase me from our life. That ends now." He raised his head, his eyes pleading. "Sophie, I didn't mean to hurt you. I was trying to, I don't know, I thought I could handle it. His words stumbled, breaking into fragments. I stood and walked toward him, my voice steady but not unkind. "Daniel, look at me. You've broken my trust. You've built a secret life. You've treated my kindness as a weakness. And yet, you expect forgiveness. Or worse, you expect me to continue as if nothing happened." He shook his head, swallowing. "Hard. I made a mistake, a huge mistake. No," I said, cutting him off again. "This isn't about mistakes. This is about betrayal, and betrayal has consequences." He looked down, silent now. The room was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of a car passing on the street outside. I could see the weight of guilt pressing down on him, the realization that for the first time in a long while, he wasn't in control. "I'm giving you a choice," I continued, my tone calm but absolute. "You can take responsibility for what you've done, face the consequences, and try to rebuild honestly. Or you can continue down this path, and I'll make sure everything is legally, irrevocably corrected. Either way, this deception ends today." He looked up at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time I saw fear. Not the anger of someone caught, but the fear of a life unraveling, the fear of losing the person he thought he could manipulate without consequence. I want to make it right, he said, voice trembling. Please, I'll do whatever it takes. I studied him for a long moment, weighing his words. Part of me wanted to feel relief, wanted to believe in the man I had married. But another part, the part that had endured months of betrayal, pain, and manipulation, knew that forgiveness was not something to give lightly. I'll hold you accountable, I said finally. We'll work through this. But it won't be easy, and it won't be quick. Trust is earned, Daniel, and right now you have to earn it. He nodded, silent, and I could see the acceptance dawning on him. Not denial, not excuses. Acceptance. That was the first step. In the weeks that followed, we worked through the practical aftermath. The bank finalized the account freezes. Legal arrangements ensured nothing could be hidden or moved without both our consent. Daniel cut all contact with Claire, and he began attending counseling, both individually and with me. The process was grueling, emotional, and exhausting, but it was necessary. I realized that the betrayal had changed me. It had stripped away a certain innocence, yes, but it had also revealed my own strength. I learned that I could be calm in the face of deception, deliberate in my actions, and unafraid to confront what I had once feared. And Daniel, he began to understand in ways he never had before the consequences of treating trust as a weapon. He learned that love is not manipulation, and that kindness is not weakness. Months later, when the house was quiet and I sat on the couch with a cup of tea, I looked at him across the room. We were not the same couple we had been. That life had ended. But in its place, a new life had begun, one built on honesty, accountability, and the slow, careful rebuilding of trust. And I realized something important. Betrayal, no matter how deep, does not have to be the end. It can be a lesson, a mirror showing us who we are, what we are capable of, and how strong we can become. I didn't know what the future held, exactly. I didn't know if we would fully recover the intimacy and security we once had. But I knew this. I was no longer afraid. I was no longer blind. And I was no longer powerless. I learned that betrayal doesn't just hurt. It teaches. It shows you your own strength, your own boundaries, and the value of trust. Sometimes the people we love the most can hurt us the deepest, but we can rise, rebuild, and protect ourselves without losing our heart. Would you have found the courage to face the truth the way I did? Think about that. And remember, your strength is always greater than you imagine.